I recently took my kid on a road trip down to the Oregon coast near Tillamook, where we met up with a group of their cousins whom they'd never met. A couple of the cousins were new to me as well, including Jason, who I found to be a deep and introspective thinker and a kindred spirit. One early morning, we sat down on the outside terrace of our shared vacation rental overlooking Netart's Bay and had this chat about redemption and our duty to use our disposable income to help others. My name is Nick, and this is Conversations on the Coast.
That's it.
Can you see the heron from your angle?
That is fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow. That must be a huge bird because it looks huge from here.
Yeah. They're, I want to say 3 feet tall.
Wow.
Yeah. When they have their neck stretched out, they're very large. Cool. So let's get to so what I do is it's called street epistemology.
Okay.
And it's about talking about something that you believe.
All right.
And sometimes it's a value, sometimes like it's a truth claim. But then we talk about what are the reasons, the main reasons that you hold the belief. And then we kind of try to peel away down to the epistemology or the methods you use and see if you're using good methods to figure out what's true. And sometimes people figure out better ways to support their beliefs.
Yeah.
Sometimes people figure out, well, they don't have a strong epistemological foundation. They reduce their confidence in the belief. It can be an interesting process. So what would be interesting in your mind to think about that it's a belief that you have? It could be something that's core, or it could be something that's more trivial.
Oh. I don't know. I know there's not a whole lot I can but belief in something happening, regularness of things. I don't know. I spend a lot of time in data, so I mean, how you know what you know is always a weird thing.
Yeah. What do you maintain any of the religious traditions or religious beliefs that you were raised with? I mean, your father was an Episcopal pastor, my cousin.
Yeah. So I don't go to church. I do like the Jesus story. It's one of my favorites. Right. I do like. I like redemption, and then it's. This is one of my. I think it's wonderful. It's been wonderful for me personally to believe in redemption, and then look at the world like as a Christian.
Yeah.
Whatever, but it's not something that I've set out to practice anymore.
Yeah. What is redemption? If you were going to define redemption and how it applies in the world.
Yeah. So I don't know. How personal do you want to get? I mean, in these things. I mean,
it's up to you. So I have a podcast.
Yeah.
Where I release these, so they do become public.
All right.
Unless you tell me you don't want it. I mean, obviously, consent is a thing. So.
No.
Yeah.
So, I've been clean for 9 years. I'm a compulsive gambler.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, for me, that personally has been the journey from, the way I've seen it, and I run a meeting in the Tri-Cities now. From the first 30 days to the first 90 days to trying to actually then work the steps, however they are, right?
Yeah.
And then have that kind of help me out, and then committing to actually being a group leader on weekends has given me a lot of reinforcement about that. But it's fucking up and then being able to be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that extends to others. but I think ultimately extends for me to myself.
Okay.
So I mean,
Yeah.
I found that really powerful, and I think it's something that a lot of folks in our family might identify with. So
Okay.
not that specific,
Yeah.
not specifically gambling, but like
So for you, redemption is something very personal
I
because
think so.
it represents your journey.
I think so.
So maybe if we look in terms of like, do you see that as a metaphorical journey?
In what sense metaphorical?
Well, I mean, just in terms of redemption and like in looking at the Jesus story,
Yeah.
do you see that like as a metaphorical story, and how does it relate to, for example, your redemption from gambling?
Oh, yeah. So I think, Christianity has a lot to say, I think, from how I read it about, being able to understand that we don't do things correctly. I mean, in fact, like, we do not.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then being able to say, you know what, that's okay, we need to figure out what we're doing it and move on. That's my,
So go tell me more about how you said we don't do things correctly.
Yeah.
Can you expand on that? Like, who is we in that story, and what do you mean by we don't do things correctly?
Oh, no, okay, this is great, and I think you're getting to it. I think it's part of the human condition that we don't have, we're not perfect, and we don't do things that are conscientious.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we don't live our lives conscientiously, so I think that's part of like trying to strive to that is really.
Can you unpack for me what you mean by living conscientiously?
Well, that's a lot to unpack. It's turtles all the way down. Wow.
Let me rephrase my question, and maybe this makes it easier.
Yeah.
What would it mean to live conscientiously? What would we be doing, and what impact does that have on the world? Does that help?
Yeah. 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 Huh. Sitting a blank.
So let's go back to the you said we as humans don't live conscientiously.
I don't think so.
How do you know that? Like, why do you believe that that's true?
I just think through my own experience. I mean, and what kind of typical behavior is. I think I think we live selfishly.
Okay.
That's a thought. And some of that's because we have a set of needs we have to satisfy. But like,
Sure.
right? But I think once you get past a certain point, it doesn't. I approach things like an economist. You do have a certain kind of amount of basic things that you do need to live on, and then once you exceed that, you then have things, and it's we call it disposable income.
Mm-hmm.
And in that sense, for you, it's disposable. right? But for someone else, it's not disposable.
Mm-hmm.
So, and having gone through, and I'll put it in terms of my own experience with gambling. There was a lot of suffering when I didn't have any money.
Mm-hmm.
Because of my own fucking fault, right? So, to some people, disposable income is disposable income, but to some people, disposable income is everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even to the point of, pathology.
Mm-hmm.
So I give a lot of thought to how that. I mean, those don't match up. Not like I'm gonna have a big. I'm not gonna solve poverty, right? And I'm not gonna solve the world's finances. But there seems to be a fundamental mismatch between what's out there in terms of suffering and the capability to address it.
Mm-hmm. So you're looking at yourself and your own struggles with when you had disposable income, you didn't use it in a responsible way.
Yeah.
Is that a good reason to believe that that's true in general for people?
Oh, absolutely not. But the nature of disposable, I mean, there's a disposable, there is something called disposable income, meaning that you've satisfied, your basic needs, and then it is as if you, in theory, could put it in a trash can, right?
Sure.
Right? So someone is suffering because they don't have a basic level of income, and there's someone who has disposable income.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to be that I'll just get the income redistribution on a grand scale is probably a lot more warranted, right? And so this is, but I don't see that, right? And
so if we were going to take that value, because that's you. What I'm hearing is you're saying that you believe that people who get to the point where they have disposable income, there's better ways to use that money to help alleviate suffering.
Yeah.
On the scale of this is something that makes me feel good, to maybe at the midpoint, this is a moral virtue, right, to redistribute wealth to help alleviate suffering, to this is a moral duty. Where are you on that scale?
Wow. Yeah. So, what's virtue versus a duty? I think it's probably more of a duty.
Mm-hmm.
But there's, I mean, I don't want to characterize a broad range of experience, right? I mean, there's a lot going on, and someone's disposable income could be another person's not disposable income, and how do regular people do this in a correct way is one of those things that and it's one of those things that gets me every time. But I think it's our duty as citizens to each other to where we can alleviate people's suffering when the cost to us is not as much as the hurt of the suffering, right? I mean, I think that at least economically that makes more sense to me, that the value of money to someone who has a lot of it is not as much as the value of money to someone who has none.
Yeah.
Right? And
So why is it important, or why is it good to alleviate somebody else's suffering?
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Because it's pretty awful. I just have my own kind of experience.
Yeah.
I don't really have you're getting down to, is there's some benefit to suffering? Yeah, I guess, but like, there's also unnecessary things.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I've had to go through things, and then, after you go through them, you're like, oh, yeah, there's a benefit there, right, and a message for me. But now I have something, right? The suffering of going through a menial job in your 20s and trying to, do something, and that's suffering, but there's an end to it in some way, right? But then there's just suffering that's meaningless.
So you're describing your experience,
Yeah.
and clearly from your experience you want to reduce your suffering.
Yeah.
Why is it important to alleviate suffering of others?
Yeah. I just don't see it as, to a point, suffering's okay, but it's not valuable for, we don't live in isolation. That's okay. We don't live in isolation. They have to have some enlightened self-interest, I think, about others who are around, even if it doesn't accrue to yourself.
Okay.
There's a...
But what's the reason? What's the reason that we should care for other people? I'm not, and I definitely, this is not something I disagree with you on. What we're doing is we're exploring your justification.
No.
So,
this is, it's hard, but it's also it just seems logical it just seems logical to me. And you're...
Logical. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's unpack that.
All right.
What do you mean by logical?
I think there's this economist thing, right? And so, if we're going to maximize the benefit of, our kind of collective experience, then, reducing meaningless suffering there are things. Catastrophic loss is pretty huge in terms of its impact immediately and its follow-on impacts into others, I think. And so, small losses, fine, people kind of are able to get over those.
Yeah.
So it's the same reason we go to roundabouts instead of crossings at the intersections, right? These kinds of fender benders are no big deal.
Huh.
But the T-bones, killing people, that's a huge cost.
Interesting.
Right? We do that because, we do the roundabouts and people complain about them, but I'm like, if you trade a fender bender side to side for a fender bender T-bone, I'll do that any day of the week, right? It just reduces suffering, and it reduces the cost on not only that, but on the public, right?
Yeah.
So if we're talking about public benefit, reducing suffering is the name of the game.
So you keep getting to, I've heard you use the phrase collective experience.
Yeah.
You've used the phrase public benefit. I'm still listening for a reason why we should care about those things.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I'll bring a personal bias into this. One of the things that I think these are very important questions is, in our political times right now, one of the fundamental differences I see between what I would think of as a Republican mindset and a more liberal mindset is caring for my good as opposed to caring for the common good. So the question is, what reason is there for us to support the common good? I think we still need to. It seems to me like your entire premise rests on that there's a benefit to the common good. And I hear you having an intuition that that's true. But is an intuition a good reason to believe something is true?
Yeah. And sometimes, sometimes you think about these things and, like you kick this around in college and then you come to some kind of thing and then you have a place marker for it, right? And then intuition kind of goes in as a place marker for discussions you already had, right? So in some sense, I'm kind of trying to dig up those things, those kind of things that you had in college, right?
It's kind of like we get away from primary sources and we start to rely on like the abstracts of people who have read the primary sources.
Oh, totally. Because if I want to rehash that conversation, it's going to take all night. But it's like, if I have a kind of stand-in for it.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think it's there is some good self-interest in promoting common good.
Okay.
And I don't think they're mutually exclusive all the time, and I think sometimes it's a false dichotomy, right? I mean, if we live in a world in which it's just the problem that the costs and the benefits don't line up all the time in a very natural way in which, like, okay, I give something and now I'm going to get it back. Right. I'm like, and I think that's the problem. It's like, I'm not getting the value for this, right? It's like, that's not what it's all about, right?
Yeah.
So like every, you do it. And so that, if there's 20 fewer people who are not shooting up by the riverside, right? And there's something you can do about that that's reasonable, right? And doesn't cost a lot. And oh, by the way, the benefits of that will exceed the costs, right? Then it's a no-brainer for society to do. And it might be even a no-brainer even if the costs exceed the benefits. Just because, there's something about looking after others, and I have no, even economic justification, but there seems to be something to be looking after others that is inherently helpful. The accounting is not going to work out. But.
Let me try to maybe insert something that I'm hearing. It's partially because I think I'm hearing something under the current of what you're saying, but also because I've had conversations like this before, and I know some of the philosophy around this. Does it make you feel bad when you see somebody else suffering?
Oh, totally.
So why do you think that is?
I think that, yeah. So, yeah, it's a funny thing. I took a class from this guy. I mean, I might digress just a little bit.
Go ahead.
His name was William Bromley, and he was at Agriculture and Applied Economics at Wisconsin. And I was in grad school, and I couldn't continue his course because I had to take another course and I had to drop it. But I went to his institutional economics course, and he's like, he had a specific vision of economics that was all about the rules and about how we as a society look forward to an end and then work backwards, and then we do now what we need to in order to get to that, right?
If only the world worked that way. I think I only need to point to climate change to tell you that we're poor as a species at doing it. But anyway, I'm with your thesis. So
once a collective decision, coming to a collective decision. Yeah. But I mean, so if you say rationally, institutions do X because here's the destination we want to get to, and then if we're going to get to that, then I have to do something now in order to do that.
Right. But if we go back to, and let's link it back to the topic, if the destination is the end of suffering, why is that the destination? Why should we aspire to that? Why is that a moral duty, as we said earlier?
I don't know, the end of suffering, I don't see that happening. But I think the end of maybe needless or wanton suffering, right? I think it's good to have a place to go like that as a, you have to have something to hang your hat on
Yeah.
to kind of do something. I would stop. And,
but why?
things. Yeah.
Right. And again,
Yeah.
by asking why, I'm not advocating for moral nihilism.
No.
Right. But I'm just trying to see, like, how are you supporting that? What is your justification? Because if let's model what could happen.
Yeah.
Let's say if you have a good rational justification
Yeah.
for ending human suffering,
Yeah.
or if you don't have a moral justification for human suffering, what could your future look like in between the two states? Like today, yes, I'm all about ending suffering.
Yeah.
Let's say you get to the point where you can end somebody's suffering, and then you start to equivocate. You're like, well, I don't really have a good reason to end people's suffering, so why should I? Whereas if you have a good epistemological foundation, you're like, oh, this is the reason why we need to end people's suffering. Then you'll always have that justification, and you can support that when you're weaker in the future, right? So that's why I think these questions are important.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But for now, I could just leave you with that thought, and you can ponder on it.
No, that's good. That's good. So what do these conversations usually go like in these kinds of directions?
I find a lot of people. What I like to say, mostly in jest, but is that people in Seattle piss me off because they're so fucking optimistic. Because everybody's coming to me with, we should help people, or people are inherently good, or things like that. So yes, I do have a lot of conversations with people where they, and I'm joking about the, they sicken me. It actually kind of gives me some hope. But the whole point of these sort of conversations is to get to, okay, that's a good thing, but what is your epistemological grounding for that? And, for a lot of people, it's, well, like, somebody told me that and it sounded good, or it feels good. And from the humanist perspective, you would say that we live as a society, we're a social species, and we depend on each other.
Yeah.
And so we don't survive as individuals unless the society survives. And so the way to make sure that society survives is to help each other. And we see in lots of other animals, we see empathy happen. We see that if one animal is suffering, the other animal will try to help it. You even see that happen across species and not just with humans. Right?
Yeah.
And so when you dig into that in a biological perspective, you find out we have these things called mirror neurons. So that when somebody else is experiencing something, we have an experience of that. And so it seems like we've evolved these mechanisms to enforce that we help each other because there is an evolutionary benefit, because that's adaptive, so that we do strengthen our species as a whole, and that is a benefit to ourselves.
Yeah.
Right. And so that, for my mind, that's for me the justification for helping others is that helping others helps society, helping society helps me.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
Cool.
It's very anthropological, right? I mean,
Yeah. Yes, anthropology and sociology and all the above. Yeah, I really enjoy having these conversations because they often go surprisingly deep. And thank you for sharing with me some of your struggles, and I appreciate
I
you
don't want it to be
being willing to
TMI or anything like that, but at the same time, like that's it was in a lot of ways a formative suffering experience, right?
Yeah.
But, even when I'm at like 40, right?
Hey, good morning.
So, good morning. So, yeah.
So I guess we'll wrap this up because Iris has joined us.
Iris.
Good morning, Iris.
You've been listening to Conversations on the Coast, a series from Washington State featuring civil conversations using street epistemology to explore what people believe and why. Find out more at streetepistemology.com.